Now that we have the important people here, after the first important people came, we're all here together as important members. So and we have Daphne, who is also an important guest with us tonight. And we have Ari Abramowitz, who, as you know, is the founder and director of Nevut, which is a wonderful nonprofit that serves American lone soldiers who have been fighting for our land and our people for the past 18 months. So Ari, please take it away.
Wow, okay. Thank you. First of all, everyone, so good to see you again. I feel it's just been a little over a year, less than a year, but it's been a little bit of time since I've been able to present and be able to share. So again, many things have happened in the world, how much has changed in Israel, how much has changed in the United States, and what's going on in our day-to-day lives. And I think something that I was just thinking of just a few minutes before we started was the actual struggle of where we were 1 year ago, how many more hostages were not able to be back yet with our families. And over the past few weeks, obviously, it's, being able to see hostages returning to their families has been very, very, very much impactful, very much something that, when you see each of them are coming home, it's a whole world for us. It's every one of them. And there's a famous there's a famous saying that we have is that every person is a whole world. And we have to remember that saying when we look at the hostages because in for Israel, every single hostage, there's such a price that we're paying for them. But it's because every single life matters so much to us. We're not just a number over here. It's not just that, okay, we lost, that someone's taken hostage. Okay, you know what, let it be. Let's figure, it's just another number. Every single person means so much to that. And we saw that, unfortunately, when Gilad Shalit in 2006 was kidnapped, he was a soldier. How many, unfortunately, thousands of terrorists were released to be able to bring him home? But we have to do what it takes because Gilad Shalit is one of ours. He's a person, he's a human, and he's a whole entire world. And this is something that attests to how important Israel really feels about the importance of life is because of this exact thing of how every single hostage is the world for them. And they're going to do whatever it takes, go to the most challenging places out there to be able to make sure that they come home. And obviously, it's been a very, very challenging time as well, with what's going on. If we just want to take a second and be able to, I wrote this week in an article about we see the smiles of the faces of the hostages that are coming home. We see, look this week, this past Saturday, we had Yarden Bibas, who we know his wife and two children are the youngest children that are still being held by Hamas in captivity. And we ask ourselves, and we see there's a smile on his face, but it's not the smile on his face. He's happy to be out of the hell where he was, for sure. It's terrible. But behind that, there's something so much deeper. There's so much behind him. There's so much sadness. There's so much brokenness. And that's something that tells for us to remember when they're going home, it's not just, okay, great, we can close the door today and be able to say, oh, wow, we got them home and they're good. And now we can go sit back and relax. It's, we got them home, how much more trauma they're dealing with when you're in such a place like that. When you lose all these people, when your wife and your children are still in captivity, when for all the people that are out there with that got back already, for the public eye, we see smiling faces because there is such joy. There is so much good going on. But for all of us to remember for a second, in what normal place in the world do we have to live in fear of just sitting at my house and all of a sudden being taken by a terrorist organization because of just being a Jewish person? And just being a person, because it wasn't just Jews, it was everyone. I think the one thing that I bring this out there to everyone to like look at for a second. We're gonna talk about the ceasefires, what's going on. Let's this not a war that's over. The problem that we have here, you're not fighting right, left. You're fighting good against evil. Evil's not going away. Unfortunately, that's our biggest challenge that we're having today. Is you see that the ceasefire, you would think that after all these months already, they'll be able to say we have a victory, but it's not because what's happening is they educate the next generation to terror. They educate the next generation to kill. The same people, and we've said this for years, is these younger children that are growing up with being indoctrinated with killing Jews, killing Israel, destroying Israel, letting it go, have another Holocaust. This is what they're trained, this is what they're teaching their children. Of course, there's not a way to say that this is over, that we say, oh, we're done with it. The problem was for Israel was trying to be able to put it under the rug and say, my dear friends and family, you know what? They want peace. They want peace. But at the same time, in their schools, they're teaching all their children about jihad, about killing, about wiping out the Jewish people. This is a problem. And so when we see that there's a ceasefire and we say, wow, you know what? Look, today what happened? United Airlines said we're able to go fly back again to Israel because it seems like, you know what? It's everything calmed down, everything worked out. Is it calming down that they said, you know what? We're actually done. We want to start a new page in our lives and we want to be able to go and begin new? Or is it, okay, we have a hostage deal right now so we could regroup, rearm, and make more crazy negotiations to get more people that have blood on their hands, and we're going to continue doing more bad stuff. And this is the challenge with the ceasefire. But then we go back to, why are we doing the ceasefire? Why are we doing that? Because we have to make sure that every single hostage comes back home. This is what it turns back into. And for all of us here in America, we could say, you know, what does it have to do with me? And we talked about this last year, was this is the step. Israel is this tiny little place on a map, but it is the place that stops anything from getting over to America. It's the place where it's protecting everyone around the world. And we have to remember that and be able to, first of all, be grateful that we could live every day and be able to say, hey, I can go to the store and not have to think about it constantly. Unfortunately, we've had definitely challenging times, even in the United States, with the rammings and other things, terrible things that have happened. And we have to be obviously vigilant and be able to be careful. But on a day-to-day basis, you're able to go shopping and not have to look over your shoulder. And I think one thing that I wanted to share with all you that I thought was so powerful. There is a tech personality in Israel who's an American that made Aliyah to Israel. His name is Hillel Fold. I don't know if many of you heard of his name, Hillel Fold. His brother, Ari Fold, was also an American that made Aliyah and was actually stabbed to death by a 16-year-old. It was stabbed to death by a 16-year-old in a terror attack. He was there standing, going shopping, and a 16-year-old came with a knife and killed him. Unfortunately, this killer that killed his brother was just released last week in this hostage deal. And then someone asked Ari, when someone asked Hillel, what do you think about this? And Hillel says, it's painful, but we got to do whatever it takes for these hostages because they're our brothers and our sisters. And I think this is something that stands to the test to exactly what we are as a people when we live in a place in a democracy, that we recognize that there's value. We value life. We value good deeds. We value our friends. We value our people around us. And I know, Sam, that thank you for being able to bring me here when I was able to come last year and speak. I don't know if everyone had the chance to be able to know that we got called back after I spoke last time. We had another lone soldier that was with us named Sam. Many of you might have remembered him,
Right.
but we got called back, and my unit got called back again. And unfortunately, four of the guys on my team were killed, and six more were injured. They were fighting against Hezbollah, and these were people that were fathers that literally have the most beautiful families. They're young families. One father was 42-year-old and has six children. Another father, that was Mordechai. Another father, Shmuel from New York, who made Aliyah. He was a father of four. Sorry, father of three. We have another one that his name was Aviad, who's a father of four as well. The most sweetest people out there. And all their thing was, they said, our reason why we're here is so that people could live in peace. That's what we're doing over here. And exactly 1 year from the October 7th massacre, they were killed. And I'll tell you this just so you all know. I mentioned last year, I run an organization, Nevut, which is for the lone soldiers when they come back to the States. We help them with the mental health and well-being. And it's always been, for me, something that I was able to help others. And when my friends were killed, my four teammates were killed and six more injured, it was a time when I didn't realize how much I needed the support. And how my own organization that I created with my wife in 2017, which has grown tremendously, how many people reached out to support, how many people came to help out. And I'll tell you that it's a long, long journey. It's not easy. In 2 weeks from now, on the 16th, I'm flying back to Israel, God willing, to be able to rejoin my unit for a few more weeks. And this time we're coming together the first time since the four of them were killed. And for me, it's very hard. But you know what? It shows the importance for everyone of what the effects of losing someone that's with you and the importance of having a community, a loving family, people around you that support you and could be there for each other. And I'm going to circle back to that our first thing that we said about the hostages, what the toll it takes on them and their families and on the people in general, people around the world that saw the horrible things that were done to mankind live on TV, live on every single streaming thing out there, how horrible it was. There's a nation that's traumatized. There's a world that's traumatized seeing how bad this world could be. And the healing process is long. It's a really long process. It's not easy. Many of you might have heard the book Sebastian Junger. There's a book called Tribe that he wrote, which is about the collective tribe, about people being together, coming as a community, that during war, how that helps people heal. The problem is when things all of a sudden go back to life, everyone all of a sudden forgets and everyone moves their own way. How detrimental it is to the healing process. When we all heard about the wildfires that went on in California just a few weeks ago, how many people got together to be able to help our brothers and sisters in California, whatever it is we could do for them, because their houses were burning down. But in that time of need, it's when we get our strongest and closest together. And that's something we can't forget and cannot lose. And if that's something that I want to impart, that the work that we're doing, that people are going to forget about the mental health and the well-being, because now than ever, it's going to take a few months as the soldiers are coming back. We see the pain already. We know it's going to be a long process. The work that we're doing just now is just beginning. It's a long, long process. But if we remember to have that community, have the resources, have the impact together that we're here for each other, we're going to save lives. And I feel like that's my message I want to be able to leave for everyone. Just the same way every day I get up, my every breath of mine is to be able, how I could be able to help out another lone soldier when they're coming back here because they've given so much, they've given their lives, they've given everything. And now I got to make sure, and we want to make sure all together that they're going to be able to live a successful and most beautiful life. But let us all together that are here tonight and our friends and family that we see not forget about what we saw in the face of evil. Band together, bond together, and be able to say that this is never going to happen again because we're going to be stronger together. We're going to have more unity together. And together, we're going to change this world for a better place for all mankind. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much, Ari. Does anybody have any questions?
We started doing any rebuilding of some of the communities.
Sam, could you ask the question? Ask the question.
I'm sorry. The question was, has there been any rebuilding started of the communities in the South? Did that come through?
I didn't hear it.
You can't? Okay.
Say it one more time. When are
Let
they
me try from this side.
Okay.
Okay, that's, who knows of sound. The question was, has there been any start to the rebuilding of the communities in the South?
From what I understand, yes, there has been, and there's many organizations out there, and I'm sure that are starting to do this work because there has been a lot of work in different areas, different communities, and unfortunately, there's so many communities that have been affected in the south and even in the north of Israel, that there's a lot of sister cities in the United States that are actually helping, that they're taking on to be able to be the partner cities to help them rebuild their areas. So it is something that's already started, and there's definitely a lot of work to do out there. And I know, Sam definitely could be able to connect you with regard to the Federation of their connections for that. But I think that is something that's very important and something very much needed to continue to be able to help everyone return to their homes and some semblance of life.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Good question. Has Hamas still been actively violent during the ceasefire so far?
I'm going to use this saying. I wouldn't sleep with a terrorist in my house. And what I mean by that is, although there were violations and it was very clear, there are already recorded violations with the IDF that they have violations that have happened during the ceasefire. You know, you can't you can't trust and say, okay, very nice that this is like everything's calm. Of course, they're rebuilding right now. They're restocking, they're checking out their infrastructures, what they have. They're doing everything that they want to be able to do to be able to continue the fighting. So we shouldn't think that, okay, it's quiet right now that they're laying down their arms. They're not doing any of that. All they're doing right now, and we know this, they're very violent people. They unfortunately executed people that they said collaborated with Israel. So they're still a very, very violent terrorist organization out there, and they are definitely they're going through all their pieces that they have of what things are available, and we know this very clearly because Israel keeps on publishing, the IDF keeps on publishing every few days of quote unquote regular civilian looking people are planting IEDs, which are improvised explosive devices, mines, other things like that. Those are officially not violations because no one's going to know. They look like a regular civilian just putting something in his house, going back to another house, booby trapping other things that are not seen by the outside world because everything's quiet. But that is all preparing for the next round. And unfortunately, that is the reality that you're dealing with, is we're not dealing with people that are putting down their arms. They're just regrouping to get stronger.
Anything else? Right, did you get that, Ari?
I didn't hear that.
That one of the tenets of Islam is that it's okay to lie in defense of the faith. And so it's difficult to trust a ceasefire written by Islamic extremists.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we have, and we know this, is unfortunately one of the bodies of the soldiers that was killed, Officer Hadar Golden, in 2014, was unfortunately was killed and taken during the ceasefire. So the soldiers were always constantly on high alert. There's no question about it. We know that we know we can't trust it. We know the same thing that there's especially a ceasefire in the north with Hezbollah, and we know how many the one of the highest generals, Uri Gordon, who is in charge of the Northern Command in North, went to the Knesset the other day. They have hundreds and hundreds of violations that Hezbollah is doing right now, if their ceasefire. And so, again, we just have to really know that, what the public knows and what we don't know going on behind the scenes is obviously very hard to know. And that's really one of the biggest challenges we have, what we see and what we don't see. Which is the reality of right now, of it sounds quiet, but it obviously isn't quiet, meaning they tried shooting even from Lebanon right now. They tried sending in drones into Israel. No one heard about that. It's not on the news. No one here, there's so many other pieces that are going on. People don't hear about it. You might not hear about it. And some things are obviously confidential, and other pieces might seem almost like it's just an innocent civilian doing something civilian-like, when really they are actually spying, checking out what's going on, seeing the readiness of the troops, seeing what else is happening. And this is the reality of what goes on. Officially, innocent civilians are doing things, and I've seen that clearly with my own eyes of, unfortunately, people that were pretending to be regular civilians farming, and you're watching clearly how what they're doing is actually they're telling the enemy where to go, and they're saying, look, the soldiers aren't there right now, go. And you're just watching that in front of you. They don't see that you're there, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just a regular civilian that's officially farming the land. So to the normal naked eye, it seems like just a regular innocent person, but he's not. He's helping them be able to go and harm the state of Israel.
Good question. All right, who is bringing humanitarian aid into Gaza right now?
So that's something that I'm not going to be able to answer that. I know there's many different countries that are doing that as well, whether it's through broker through Qatar with regard to, the United Nations sending it in through other countries. I know Jordan's involved with it, and we know that Egypt is, but again, it's not my expertise in that area. I know that you can find out a lot of that online, but that's definitely not something that I'm well versed in.
Sounds very humanitarian, but it always tries to kind of dry it up so that they're.
I hear what you're saying, but I think I posted in the group a couple weeks ago a picture of a couple of markets in Gaza that were overflowing with meat and vegetables and grains. So the press coming out of Hamas is different than reality most of the time. Any questions from those online? Vivian or Rabbi Baruch or Daphne?
Okay, so we have a question over here. Do you see any road for Israel and the local Arabs towards living peacefully? That's a very, very good question. And I think one of the biggest things that I think for Israel to be able to really be able to have see that there's peace properly with Israel. Again, it's an opinion. There's many different opinions out there. To be able to say that to happen, I would say we got to start with the basics with our children. It starts from a very young age. If children, as I mentioned, are educated to hate and to kill from day one, then there's no way of being able to have peace because it's just brought up in the DNA. It's brought up in the blood. And I think that one of the biggest things that we have that you see constantly going on when there's calls for a jihad or things against and you're inciting, how is it possible for the next generation to be able to learn that that's not the way to do it? And I think the biggest thing is by setting examples. And if that's not being taken from, from what's going on, it's really hard to see that, again, there's a lot of different options of how to make it. Will it work? Will it not work? How people, people say different solutions that they have. But I really just think, again, we just have to go back to the basics. Everyone here has had children before. If you're a parent, you gotta educate your kids right. It's just how it is. And if you're not gonna educate them, or you're gonna educate them on violence and hate, it's just gonna continue that way. So if that could be changed, if there's something that could change that way, then we could see a very bright future for everyone. But if it's based off of just that we're going to try to change it through violence, through other ways out there, I just, again, it's unfortunately, it's every day. It's just constant. It's constantly, you're checking the news and unfortunately you're seeing another person was killed here. There's another terrorist attack here. It's really, really challenging. I mean, I lived in Israel 2015. It was every day you're walking outside, you're looking over your back because there was another stabbing attack. My wife was in the market in Jerusalem, and all of a sudden I get on my WhatsApp that there's a terrorist attack in the market, and I'm like this is crazy. Like you couldn't walk out of your house and there wasn't another stabbing attack or ramming attack. And you're like, it's just copycat, copycat. Who could do the next thing like that? It sounds great. Let's do the next thing. And it's just a rough way of like people just want to have peace and quiet and be able to live a life. And it got to start with the youth because unfortunately, many of the terrorists that are coming out aren't educated people that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. There's a lot of terrorists that are in their teens. And that's a really scary thing. When you have 11-year-olds stabbing someone, that's a problem. When you have a 12-year-old doing that, unfortunately, one of the soldiers that I know was stabbed. He was a civilian. 11-year-old kid went with a massive kitchen knife. Like this is crazy. It doesn't make sense. Like I have a son that's 11 years old. It doesn't make sense that type of thing. So it starts with the educating from the bottom up.
Yes. Good question. Why are there hundreds of Palestinian prisoners released for just 2 hostages? 3.
Yeah, you know what? It was a very interesting question of, just getting into this thing of how is it possible are there hundreds of terrorists being released for for just such a small group of, how is it possible? And I think the problem that unfortunately came with this right now, and again, we don't know the details of what went on behind closed doors, and we still don't know. So we have to just remember that one piece. We don't know all the details, and it's interesting. I'm gonna just jump off for 1 second here. There's books now coming out about what went on in the Yom Kippur War.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating to read. This is over 50 years later that things are being declassified. And you're like, wow, like that's so interesting. I would have never thought of that. And so even where we are today's day and age, what in the world's happening that you're saying, like you said, how is it possible right now that there are, for one civilian, there are 30 prisoners going out, people that have blood on their hands, have life sentences are going out. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So it sounds like it's a really rough backwards thing and it doesn't make sense. And you see, and at the same time, it's like we need to get this deal done fast before there was a deadline. We want to get it done ASAP before, before the Biden administration finished. We want to be able to get it, we be able to get it in time. So was there a lot of pressure that way? I don't know. We don't know what really went on behind closed doors, and we're not gonna find that out for probably many years. We might hear bits and pieces, but again, on paper, it's definitely a very challenging time for us to see that because like we said, the people that are coming out doesn't make sense. But the problem is it's always been like that there's been this numbers game of, well, a soldier's valued at or a civilian's valued at a certain amount of people and a certain amount of terrorists. And because of that, this is how it has to be. And it's unfortunately, it's a big price that as the Jewish nation we have to pay.
I mean, can I just
Yes,
add?
Doctor.
I mean, it's been like that for decades, and I think it's basic negotiation. If one side wants something and the other side knows it, I mean, you said it's the sense of desperation that Israel has to get the hostages back is not reflected. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the details, but I don't think that the Palestinians are fighting. I mean, maybe individuals are, but as a country, I don't think they're fighting to get the prisoners out. I mean, certainly it doesn't have the same, it doesn't have the same pain associated with the whole country isn't saying their names and putting pictures of them up.
Right.
I mean, it's just basic negotiation, right? It's the willingness to give, the desperation.
For all those hundreds of prisoners, are just gonna go right back out and want to kill again, do the same thing again. How can you ever feel safe in this?
Right, the question was, how can we agree to that deal knowing, just like with the Shalit exchange, and Yahya Sinwar was part of that exchange, and he was the mastermind behind October 7th. We know that these people, as you said, Ari, will be committing more terrorist acts. And you mentioned the one young man who was killed, and actually, I was listening to a podcast last week and was taken back to 1998 when a young man from where I lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the time, he was attending Hebrew University. There was a terrorist attack at Mount Scopus and he died. The person who killed him was released this week. And very mixed emotions. On the one hand, I am so glad that those young ladies and then the men were released. On the other hand, I can't believe that Benny's murderer was, sorry. Yeah, it's hard. It's a question for another topic, if that's okay. We can definitely cover that on another session. So it's important, right? So Ari, I want to respect your time. Thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about our lone soldiers? Are they all now stood down? Are any still in the field? What are your expectations for the near future?
Okay, first of all, I appreciate this, and again, I just first of all, Sam, I just want to say that I'm sorry about this because again, it's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, first of all, when you see someone that killed a friend of yours be able to go free. There's nothing, and then again, what stops them from doing it? That was the question of it. Obviously, it's just so. We don't know. I don't know what to say on that. There's no words. And again, obviously, then that's why I just say, even for myself as as a soldier, you know, we don't see the big picture. Obviously, we don't of not the big picture. I mean, you're not letting them go, but obviously, there's is there like you're hoping inside of your hopes that is there something that they're doing when they're letting them out? There's a poison that they're getting or something because you're like, how are they letting someone that took my friend's life and so many others? There's no words, and for the families that are going through this as well, the immense pain that they're dealing with as well. So just with you on that. With regard to the situation for the lone soldiers, no, the lone soldiers, there's actually just something people should know. Again, lone soldiers are those that came from outside of Israel to serve in the IDF. There's been a massive uptick of people from outside around the world that went to serve now in the IDF even more. So there's going to continue being lone soldiers going, and even on a bigger scale, because when something like this happens, many more serve and want to serve because they want to be able to help and defend the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And I think that's something that's very, very powerful to see. And so there's definitely many more that are coming. And I think for us, the big work that lies ahead is this isn't over. This isn't over. We're going back and forth. Just like I mentioned originally that I'm going back in 2 weeks from now, or, it's for everyone else the same thing. It's not done. We got to still go back. We have a lot to do. The job's not over. And even though we might see it, there's a ceasefire and all that, unfortunately, the terrorists are still out there and there's still a lot of work to do. And when we know that, the mental health and the well-being of the soldiers when they're back here is also something that lasts forever, lasts a long time. And I think that's part of this thing. It just doesn't go away. It's not done yet. But I just think that if we're able to be in a place right now for the war where we're, just even right now over these few days where people are recuperating a little bit, and maybe just give everyone a little bit of just that breathing room to be able to get them to the healing place, to be able to make a big difference moving forward.
Makes sense. Thank you so very much, Ari.
Okay,
And I
appreciate it.
will post the link to Nevut,
Well, thank
and
you.
we will continue to support your important work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye everyone.
Okay, and yeah, for the rest of you online, please feel free to stick around. And let's see, I will try to make this workable here.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for
Hey,
doing
Vivian,
this
you're
via
here.
Zoom.
Great,
Yeah.
glad to see you. Okay. Where did we go? Trying to bring it up to share. It's not coming up to share. Oh, it's because I'm on the wrong screen. There we go. Oh, somebody's got, oh, that was the question before. Okay. And there we, okay, you guys see the screen? Online?
Yes.
Okay, great. And yes, here we do have snacks, so please feel free. It was great to have Ari, and I would not trade this time for anything, but I think I'll cut my presentation a little short since we had so much time with Ari. And so we'll, rather than focusing on anti-Semitism, we'll just focus on Jewish identity and a couple of the things that I brought today. And just by way of reference, the USC Shoah Foundation has a lot of very good information on anti-Semitism. I gave this particular presentation. This will be my third time. I said we won't go through the whole thing, but I was asked to go to the Richmond Police Academy and give a presentation on anti-Semitism. And they said, Sam, we know about the Holocaust. And of course, I do talk about in this presentation the similarities between 1930s Germany and 2020s United States, as well as Europe and elsewhere. But they said that we already know about that. Holocaust education is mandatory in the Commonwealth of Virginia. However, what we don't know is what happened before and what happened after. We know that anti-Semitism existed, but what do we need to know? So this presentation, part of it, looks at going clear back to the Babylonian expulsion of Jews from Israel, clear up until our current day. And what I, Daphne, and Rabbi Baruch, and others in our community have experienced, which you've heard some of those stories, but I try to put it in historical context. And the USC Shoah Foundation does an excellent job at doing that as well. So, but today, let's focus on Jewish identity. And a lot of my Christian friends don't quite understand the connection that modern Jews who live in the United States, maybe some have never been to Israel, have with Israel, and why this is such a non-negotiable issue. And so I know that the folks in this room are friends, and you probably get it, but maybe I can give you some more tools to help you explain to some of your friends that may ask you questions. So, what does it mean to be Jewish?
Revolves around feelings of religion, ethnicity, and peoplehood that are dynamic. What do I mean? Let me explain. According to the biblical text, the Jewish story begins with Abraham, who about 4,000 years ago was the first to introduce the revolutionary concept of monotheism, a belief in one God without physical form, later also accepted by Christians and Muslims. Abraham's family became the leaders of 12 tribes, the early people of Israel. Famine struck and left their homeland, becoming slaves in Egypt. Moses led them out and received the 10 Commandments, foundational moral laws emphasizing respect, justice, and ethical behavior. The Jewish commitment to learning and education as part of our religious and cultural traditions started here. The people of Israel eventually returned to their homeland. Jerusalem and the temples they built there became their spiritual core. Invasions of other people led to a 2,000-year exile of most of the Jews. During the exile, Jews settled worldwide, adapting to local cultures. Without one country or one language to unite them, what made them a people? Well, exactly where the feelings of identity that I mentioned before. First, there's our common religion, which can be practiced in many different ways, written in the Torah, also known as the 5 books of Moses. Our common memory, history, customs, and heritage are also key. No matter where we live, we celebrate the same holidays and have many of the same traditions. Another thing that's kept us together as a people for so long is our connection to the land of our ancestors, Israel. While there has been a continuous Jewish presence in the land of Israel, the yearning to return to our biblical homeland has been the deep and emotional heart of Jewish life throughout the 2,000 years of exile. The connection of the Jews as indigenous people in the land of Israel, as well as their experience of anti-Semitism, led to the Zionist movement. At a time of rising nationalism in Europe in the 1800s, the Jews sought to establish their own homeland. As part of the process, they even revived the dead language of Hebrew. The Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were murdered, highlighted the urgency of creating a Jewish homeland. In 1948, the modern state of Israel was established. It became a home for Jewish refugees from post-war Europe, from Africa, and from Muslim countries and Jews. For many Jews, no matter where they live or how religious they are, a strong aspect of their identity is their connection with the state of Israel, the only Jewish state in the whole world. Our love of learning and made times the struggle to survive have made Jews innovators, thinking outside the box. Wherever we live throughout the world, Jews have contributed many breakthroughs in all sectors of society. As you can see, Jewish people are diverse. We don't all look the same or speak the same language, but the traditions and religion most of us share, and the personal values, as well as a common heritage and history, make the Jews a people.
So, backwards. So yes, there is religion, and religion rooted in history. However, as an ethno-religion, not all Jews are religious. And in any given community, it can be anywhere from 10% are religious to maybe 60%, and that's high. And then there's also a component of atheists who are also Jews and have no religion, but they're still Jewish because of the ethnic component of coming down from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and through all of the generations until today. So it's different than Christianity in that it's not a particular faith-based religion, it's both and. So even the atheist has to acknowledge that, yes, I'm lighting candles at Hanukkah to celebrate the victory over the Greeks, which is basically a secular holiday of sorts. And I can talk a little bit about that later, but they have to acknowledge that the reason we had the lights to light anyway is because there was a temple in Jerusalem which had a menorah which was being lit because God gave the commandment back in the Torah to have this continual light. So even those who are atheists agree that there are religious foundations. And without those religious foundations, without those customs and rituals that we see, there's no way to maintain a peoplehood. That identity is coming through the Ten Commandments, through the land, through the traditions that we have gained over the centuries. And I brought some books to show you. You know, she had that book there, and what it said was Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. And I brought this. This is something that you can definitely look at it, but if you notice, this is a Bible and commentary. It's huge. It's called the Israel Bible, and it's put out by Israel 365. And it does have both the Hebrew and English text, but the commentary on every page of this Bible has to do with the land of Israel and how much the Bible from Genesis to Malachi talks about the land of Israel and the connection of the land to the people. So you can see down here, the commentary in the gray is all through this book on just about every page, and not every other page. And that's how much of the Bible is about the land of Israel. Also, what she had but didn't show, and I brought different versions of the prayer book. We call it a siddur, or an order. Just like in high churches in Christianity, which have a liturgy, Judaism is a liturgical faith. And that goes back to Babylon during the first expulsion, that we needed a way to maintain the regularity of the faith without a temple, without a sacrificial system, without a calendar that mandated us tending our crops in certain ways, because we largely weren't farmers in Babylon. And so there was developed a home-based and community-based religion, and a liturgy grew out of that. And one thing that you will find in all of these, this is probably the most well-known traditional, this is the Art Scroll Siddur. And I have two, one Reform, one Conservative, and another Orthodox Siddur on the table. But the primary creed of Israel, of Judaism, is known as the Shema. We get that in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, where we are told, and we recite twice a day at least, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." And that is in every single service, to remember that he is our God, of Israel, the people, and also Israel, the land. There's something that surprises many of my Christian friends, is that unlike in Christianity, where there is a blessing said before the meal, there's actually a command in Torah to say a blessing after the meal. And it specifically says, when you eat and are satisfied, you will thank the Lord your God for the food and for the land. It's built in, because the land provided your food. But is it any land that you happen to be on? No. It's the land of Israel that God has provided for us. And so within this prayer, we actually then have a subsection that says, rebuild Jerusalem, the holy city, soon and in our days. Blessed are you, Lord, who rebuilds Jerusalem in his mercy. And that is a specific statement of the general statement, which comes before it, which says, yes, we thank you, O Lord our God, for all that you have given us to all the living, as is written, you shall live and be satisfied. Bless the Lord your God for the land which he gave you. Blessed are you, O Lord, for the land and for the nourishment. And then specifically for Jerusalem and rebuild that. So you can imagine that the identity of your children as they're hearing this after every meal, oh, we have a home that's not here. We have a connection that goes back to Torah. That is something that other people have, if you're Italian, if you're French, if you're German, if you're Russian, but it's a different kind of connection because we firmly believe it was a God-given connection that does not have any end to it at all. So please feel free to come and take a look at those. My clicker is right there. And that's the ethnicity, that peoplehood. People are also sometimes intrigued by the notion of converts. And one of the concepts in the Torah is that there was a mixed multitude that came out of Egypt. So not everybody who came out of Egypt was a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Some of them were Egyptians. Some of them were from other African countries. And we see that when they come into the wilderness and they are given the choice, you can be circumcised and become one of us or not. But by the way, you can't marry until we're sure that you've made this decision. It's a little more complicated than that. But there was a waiting period of 3 generations. And then we see later, famous person, Ruth, right? She was a convert. She chose to become part of the people of Israel and gave birth to the grandfather, or to the father of King David, and became part of that royal line, the Jewish line of the Davidic dynasty. So converts are not inconsequential. At the beginning, there's a different process than just being born. By being born Jewish, you have all the rights and responsibilities thereof to ask to become part of Israel. We actually have a rule that goes back to Talmudic times. You have to be refused 3 times before you're allowed to even start learning about Judaism to convert. We don't proselytize. And we're very cautious about who we let in. And you'll often find that people who convert are much more knowledgeable about Jewish history and Jewish traditions than people who were born into Judaism and didn't unfortunately have parents who were teaching them. So I actually just had lunch with a young lady who's going through a conversion process in Richmond, and it's amazing how much the person who's going through conversion is willing to learn. But then what does that do? That means that they are now also a full member of the ethno-religion. Even though they don't have ancestry, they are counted as full people in the tribe of Israel and can make aliyah. They can get an Israeli passport, no problem. In most cases, no problem. As with anything Judaism, it gets complicated, and there's not one answer. Judaism is not a monolith, and even myself, I can hold 3 opinions at the same time, which is confusing. Yes, ma'am.
So this is going back to when you were
Sure.
reading. Were you reading back to front? Or front?
Yeah, Hebrew goes the opposite direction. Instead of right to left, it
And
goes
so
left
you
to
were
right.
reading Hebrew, it looked like you were translating.
Correct.
Wow.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
like, do all, I mean, not all Jewish people know Hebrew, that's because you're like a professor.
Unfortunately, not everybody does, but yes.
So is that written like in an English text for people that?
Right. There's English on one side and Hebrew on the other side.
Okay.
And you can buy it even interlinear so that you have the English word directly under. But then, as I was sharing with this young lady earlier today, then you have the question of, well, is that the right word for that translation? I don't know. I think this word, and if you look at the same prayers in each of these siddurim, you'll find slightly different translations due to a variety of different reasons. So good
Like
question.
any Bible.
I appreciate that. History, memory, and traditions. I discovered 30 years ago now that my family didn't just come from Mexico in 1925. However, what actually happened in the late 1600s was my ancestor Hernandez, he joined the Spanish army to get away from the Inquisition. He did not want to convert. He also didn't want to die. So he actually joined the Spanish, which seems like, okay, you're putting on a Spanish uniform and you're afraid of the Inquisition. So it looks like you're going into the village, but it was somewhat of a disguise, right? To have a Spanish uniform on, then you weren't questioned. And he went to Mexico, he was a conquistador, he went to Mexico, he fought Mayans, and then the Inquisition came to Mexico. And so he went AWOL. And he went up to then the independent state of Chihuahua, where he had his family and they kept their traditions internally. They would not associate with Catholics because you never know. The Inquisition might have spies, probably did. And that's how my family survived for generations, hidden as hidden Jews. And so I discovered that my connection does go not in the direction I thought, but in a unique and blessed direction. That when I was able to meet for the first time my Aunt Isabel, my grandfather's aunt, who came shortly after my great-grandmother, she said, Sam, perhaps you're the one we've been praying for. Because they had been waiting for generations for someone to be willing to be openly Jewish. So converts, yeah, right, exactly, thank you. People who rediscover their heritage, it's a really wonderful thing, and there are more and more people making these discoveries. Some people estimate there's 9 million descendants of conversos in South America today, and that's a low conservative number. So you can just imagine, and depending on how you count a Jew, there's maybe 17 million Jews in the world today. We could easily increase that number by 50% if people decided to make that decision. But again, it's an individual decision, and there is still work to be done, even if you do have that ancestry. Continual connection to the land of Israel. Somebody said there's a church going in September. I guarantee you that if you go, you don't have to be Jewish to stand in Jerusalem and know this is a special place. It's amazing feeling. And for Jews, again, even atheists have told me, yeah, there's something going on there. I'm not going to say it's God, but there's something going on there. I'm like, well, I'll say it's God for you. You feel at home. You feel blessed to know that you belong. I can go anywhere in the world to a synagogue, and they might have a different color siddur, it might be in a different translated language, but it's going to be the same service. I go to any synagogue in Israel, same thing, same sort of different traditions. It may be Orthodox, it may be Reform, maybe Masorti, which is British conservative, but we're going to be saying the same prayers. And we have similar expectations for standing for our people. And when, I don't know if I've told this story before, the last time I was in Israel, which was 2022, too long ago, I had been walking through the old city. I stopped in an antique store, and you have to be careful of antique stores in the old city of Jerusalem because you never know exactly what they're selling. But I got into a conversation with a Christian young man who was at the University of Haifa, and the Muslim storekeeper who had been supplying him with certain artifacts because he was an archaeology graduate student. We started to talk, and it was almost not quite at the same time. The young man, the student, he said, Sam, you need to make Aliyah because I want you to be one of my professors. And the storekeeper said, yeah, we need more people like you making Aliyah coming down. So a Christian and a Muslim. Then I walk down the street and I come across a Jewish storekeeper. He has Torah scrolls. He's a Sefer. He writes Hebrew in sacred documents. And I stopped and just looked. We just met each other for the first time ever. And I said, "Aren't you a little uncomfortable here in the old city surrounded by Muslim storekeepers?" And he says, "No, the question is, are they comfortable here in our land?" And then he looked at me and he said, "And so you're walking around like you own the place. When are you going to move?" Oh, wow. See, there's a connection, Jew to Jew. And Rabbi Baruch, and I think we can all make that claim that we've had that sense before. I'm sure Christians have a similar sense at times, but it's something special that our connection to the land and to the people, it really is unique. And even somebody who hasn't been in synagogue, maybe hasn't said the Shema for decades, they come into a place with other Jews. It's home. And we're seeing, that's one of the silver linings of October 7th. We're seeing more Jews who have not been with the community come back in, and their children are coming back in. There's a brand new middle school program in Richmond to get in those kids who are not affiliated, to at least understand their heritage and their connection to the people and to the land and to our God. Well, yes, and that the map again is irrelevant because I was going to go. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Jewish people who wear the hats.
Sure. Short answer, they're still Jews. They are definitely Jews. You're talking about the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic. Hasid means kind, and they go back to the Baal Shem Tov, who was a rabbi in Eastern Europe in the 1500s, who said, we need to come into the modern era because they were still dressing as though they lived in the Middle East, in Europe. And so they started wearing coats and collared shirts and trousers and shoes and hats. Well, and they haven't changed. So they're still wearing the same clothes that they did because we need to keep the tradition. And the tradition came from this teacher who was very revered. So we're not going to change that tradition. However, depending upon the study, they have different teachers, different traditions, but it's a kind of joy in that deep tradition that I can't explain. You just have to experience.
When you say ultra-Orthodox, what is that?
So from left to right, we have like atheist and then humanistic Judaism, and then Reform, which is making Judaism as modern as you possibly can, and Renewal, which is making it a little more deep and traditional, but still there, and then Conservative, which started in the 1950s in the United States, and they're kind of center. Then we have, going to the right side of the spectrum, Orthodox, which is we believe the whole Torah and nothing but the Torah, but we still live in the 21st century, and so there's certain things that we're still going to allow people to do, especially in emergencies. For the sake of a life, you're going to make exceptions, and you're going to drive on Shabbat. You're going to light a fire. You're going to do work. The ultra-Orthodox we are going to actually build a fence around the Torah so that there's no way you're going to violate the Torah. So you don't, if you're walking to synagogue, make sure you're only walking so many steps to synagogue and back from home. And make sure that if you're going to use any electrical appliance and you have a timer on it so it goes on and off automatically, make sure you don't touch it. And if it goes off, you don't touch it. So that there's a fence around that Torah, so that's the short explanation. Happy to have a month-long class.
What percentage do you think you still go kosher? Foods and preparation?
That is an interesting question because there are a lot of folks who are not necessarily religious, but do keep kosher for tradition's sake. And then there are some who consider themselves to be Orthodox and keep kosher at home, but will go out to a Chinese restaurant and eat whatever's there. It has to do with the American milieu of Judaism and how we came and found freedom that we didn't know anywhere else, yet knew that we needed to maintain our communities, but also to fit in. That's where we get the name changes. It didn't happen in Ellis Island. It happened when people were trying to get jobs and they wanted to fit in. It wasn't because they were necessarily afraid of being rejected, but they were concerned about fitting in. So they changed their names. The food has always been available to be kosher, but people who really want to fit in say, I'm going to eat whatever I want. And the kind of the funny part of that is if you are a vegetarian in the United States in 2025, you're probably keeping kosher without realizing it, just because of the standards of cleanliness for food preparation in the United States, even if it doesn't have a symbol on it like an OU or a certain K. It's probably meeting the standard without a rabbi approving. So when I have that conversation with some of my more secular Jewish friends, they don't appreciate the humor.
Where do Jewish people who have become Christians fit in within the Jewish community hierarchy? I mean, like, do they?
How long do you have?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
2-month class.
Great. The shorter answer is not for very long or very comfortable.
really?
And the not for very long is because it is difficult to produce a second generation, much less a third. And so if you become a Christian, you are still ethnically Jewish, yes. But what traditions do you keep? Both? Well, that sets up into some confusion within the individual, much less within a household with children. The children are much more, I'm a sociologist by training. The children are much more likely to go with the majority of the household or whatever's strongest. And again, in America, Christianity tends to win out. The reason Hanukkah is so big in America, it's not in Israel, is because of Christmas, because we're competing. Therefore, we feel the need to build it up. But then there are Jewish families and often intermarried families that used to call it a Hanukkah bush, but now they just call it a Christmas tree. And so the kids will often migrate again. They don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be called other. And so they go along with the majority and they lose their Jewish identity. But good question.
I just had 2 ladies that I worked with that were Jewish. And that called them hypocrites, because it was like, whenever there was a Jewish holiday, they took off work. But it's
Right.
like, but when was the last time you went into the synagogue? Oh, well, I don't do that. But you're taking the holiday off? Well, it's a good excuse.
Well, sure. And there are Christians who take advantage of Good Friday or
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's a human thing. It's not a Jewish or
Yeah.
Christian thing.
We used to have a plant in Georgia. And for Good Friday, everybody got up. And I said, wait a minute. So that plant's more religious than the plant out in California? Does Good Friday's Good Friday, no matter where you're at.
Management sees things differently in one place than another. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. One thing that we are trying to do in our schools is to make sure that all the schools are aware of the Jewish calendar and which holidays. And there is a hierarchy of holidays. Those that are recorded in the Bible are of a higher importance than those that, like Hanukkah, which is just a traditional secular holiday. So we try to make the schools aware of those and say, yes, please allow your Jewish students to take off Rosh Hashanah. And if they want to take off 2 days for Rosh Hashanah, that's perfectly legitimate. Yom Kippur, absolutely. First day of Passover, absolutely. Not the next 6 days, but the last day of Passover, absolutely. So slowly, schools are becoming more accepting of these. And that was even before October 7th, that they have become more accepting. So, and that actually also then has a positive impact on our Jewish families. It's like, oh, okay, so Chaim gets to take off the day. Well, okay, maybe we need to have a Rosh Hashanah dinner, or maybe we will go to synagogue. because now I don't have, and well, I need daycare anyway, so I'll take the day off and we'll all go to synagogue. So it can have a positive aspect in our community, which is great.
Is this a book that was all Jewish families?
The Siddur, if there is a history of religious observance in the family, they probably have one on the shelf somewhere, whether or not they opened it up. A family that does go to synagogue at least twice a month, I would say, maybe even if they go once a month, are probably going to have one as well. Then you get the really strange people like me who actually pray 3 times a day, and I've got lots of them. Sure, and we'll make that the last question. That's it's 7:45. And I also want to make sure that, we lost the rabbi. But Daphne and Vivian, if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to chime in. Shabbat is essentially the 7th day. Shabbat means 7. It comes from the word Sheva, which is 7. Kind of sounds the same. And if you recall in Genesis, what did God do on the 7th day? He did. He ceased from working. And he said, this is good. And so he gave it to Israel. Specifically, we jump over from the creation of Adam on the 6th day, clear up until we get over to Israel in the Sinai. And he says, the 7th day shall be a day of rest for you, complete rest. You shall do no laborious work, is the English translation. Well, and then, of course, the question is, yeah, right. And so after a few hundred years of debating this question, the Jewish sages decided, well, the most explicit example of work that we have in the Torah is building the tabernacle in the wilderness. So anything that was required to build the tabernacle, we're going to consider that work. You can't do that. Well, what about taking curtains that are already cut, that already have the pegs in them, and putting them on the poles? Can you do that? Well, that comes to building the fence around so that you don't violate the core. So I actually had a discussion about this at a synagogue in Florida last month, where one of the teenagers said, we have this empty box and it's already almost torn down, but I want to tear down the other corner. Can I do that? And I said, well, let's go back. What is some of the work that was done in the tabernacle? She goes, oh, because then she thought, cutting the curtains, cutting the bricks, not the bricks, so that was the temple, I apologize. I'm cutting the wood that went into. So, did you tear a box? Probably not. And so it's fun to have those conversations. Well, it depends. I personally only use for family and emergency. I do not use it for work. I don't look at email. Don't do Facebook. None of that. But if it's my sister calling about my mom who just had surgery today, yeah, I'm gonna look at it and pick it up. I leave it in the car when I go to the synagogue, and I leave it downstairs in the basement when I'm at home and I'm upstairs. But I see the value of an emergency. And so, but that's me. I'm not Orthodox. I wouldn't want to give the Orthodox a bad name by looking at my behavior. So Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox will not use any electricity on Shabbat at all because they view it as igniting fire. So insofar as electrons do provide a source of heat and energy like fire, and fire is prohibited, lighting a fire is prohibited, therefore they don't use electricity. Now again, as I said, you can set a timer to turn things on and off, but you need to make sure that that timer is set and not touched well before Shabbat. Did I answer your question? Well, that's always on, but you're not going to use it.
Yeah, I bet you're going to have all your timers and everything.
Right. And you know, during the past 18 months, since October 7th, people have been encouraged, leave your television on because you may need to know what's happening. There may be an air raid signal that you hear, but it may be a false alarm because something came and then was broken up, or maybe it was just a false alarm altogether. Or maybe this is worse than what you're hearing, and you need to not only get into your safe room, you really do need to take an extra 5 seconds and get to the bomb shelter outside.
So it's more a time of praying and.
Absolutely,
and
yeah,
reading,
right.
meditating.
Spending time with family, eating but not cooking, but you can have the pot that's already started, that has the soup in it that's heating for all day. So you still have hot food. You've got the fresh bread that you cook Friday morning, and you've got the kids and the grandkids and the cousins and everybody together, and you're studying. Somebody the other day just made a joke about why are there still board games around? Because Jews need something to do on Shabbat other than read and talk. So we generally don't play Monopoly because that's money and talking about finance. But sorry, hooks and ladders, that's perfectly acceptable as a board game. One more quick question.
The Jewish people. Or is that-
Oh no, we really like our wine, I'm a big fan of certain brands of whiskey and Scotch.
But I bet ultra orthodox.
No, of course, yeah. Alcohol is not forbidden at all. Right, yeah. Now in the Bible we talk about wine, and in our daily prayers we talk about wine that makes the heart glad, and God has given us that. And so there are actually in the New Testament, who is it that says take a little wine for your stomach? Right. They were Jews. So no, alcohol, anything to excess is bad. Rabbi Hillel said everything in moderation, including your alcohol. Don't
Don't
become
get drunk.
Exactly, right. But that doesn't mean don't enjoy what God has given you. As a matter of fact, the rabbis speculate about the questions that you're going to be asked when you stand before the Creator. And one of those questions is, what did you fail to enjoy of my creation? That is an interesting question, isn't it not? And so I won't be able to say I didn't enjoy Scotch, because I do. What you have to be careful of is, right, we'll have to trade secrets. The wine, it does have a status of being kosher for how the grapes are harvested by Jews or non-Jews, but then have to be washed, and it needs to go through a specific process that is observed by people trained in how to make kosher wine. And you can make kosher wine that is only for Jews to drink together, or kosher wine that both Jews and non-Jews can drink together, which is a fine tone there. But then, so when we get into things like flavored brandies, then you have to be careful about whether it's flavored with fruit that may not have been kosher in its fermentation process and things like that. So, but if we're talking just a nice double barrel Scotch. All right, well, we still have Vivian and Daphne. Questions, comments?
No, I'm just listening, trying to stay
Okay,
awake too.
hope you feel better, Vivian. Daphne?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say it's a nice experience. I think part of being Jewish is, when you're interacting in the world beyond your culture, it's not really being known, and it feels really lovely to have people be curious and ask questions. It just gives me a warm feeling to share, to share the culture and to have people curious and talk about it. It's a really beautiful experience to share with people, and I just want to appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Daphne. I totally agree. And I cherish our friends here and those who are standing with us today in prayer and in support of the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Thank you very much.
Can I just add one more thing,
Please.
All right. No, which is consistent with what you're saying, but I think especially lately, since October 7th, I think there's just so much, I think a lot of misunderstanding and, a lot of feelings that exclude, that just necessarily, I think, can't acknowledge everyone's experience. So I think many people I've struggled with people who are maybe focused on a narrow part of the experience, and I've just felt much more isolated and much less understood than I ever have in my whole life since October 7th. And misunderstood in a really negative way. That's just really difficult. That's all. Did I lose you?
I can hear you.
Oh, I think we might have gotten dropped. I see two
Oh,
participants.
maybe.
I was
Yeah,
like
that's just us then, because I'm like listening to you.
I was pouring my heart out and no one is replying, and
Yeah, well, I was listening to you, and just to
thanks.
kind of continue in on that conversation is I think that we're in a world today where some people don't want to understand, and some people want to take the differences and just be really mean about it.
I think that's I think, people are really interested in what's easy and not able to understand, not putting in effort, right? Like people
No.
aren't making an effort to understand things that are complicated. Everything has to be simple and, Twitter ready.
Yeah, well, or in that sense too, like the Twitter ready. Yeah, and these little sound bites where they can
Yeah.
just zip in and be mean.
Yeah. There's a great book I'm actually just starting to read. Well, I haven't started yet, but there's a great book called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt,
Oh,
I think.
wow.
It's really fascinating about how, all these different factors contribute to where we are now, where people can't tolerate, everything is good and evil, everything is black and white. Whose side are you on? No nuance.